we never come to your word lightly or quickly or closed. And God, would you help us never to come to your word with some kind of confirmation bias that we already understand it, we're already living it, we're already doing it, we already got it. But God, would you pierce our hearts? We welcome you to cut us with the truth of your word every time, every single time. We come to you with an openness of heart and a humility to learn and to listen, to be shaped by you. And so, God, we ask that you come as a carver and you shape us and you do that work in us. You help us to be honest about ourselves before you. And God, we ask for that. We long for that. We're desperate for that. We're in the insanity of it. We are desperate to hear from you. In whatever way that you will, we long for it. It's in your name. Amen. I'm going to tell you a tale of two contradictory lives. And a lot of you may remember this last semester, the guy that I met when I was in Ecuador for a summer. And I was just with a buddy. We were just working on this this kind of like church leader restoration site in partnership with some pastors. And there was a guy there named Maurice, and he was this Canadian, kind of big, burly, intimidating, I think he was 48 years old, and he would wear Harley-Davidson leather vests every single day, and he would wear a Harley-Davidson leather do-rag every single day. I never saw the top of his head without a leather do-rag every single day. And what he would do, we were there, and we were just like, how can we be used, whatever, and we were just like building a few things, cleaning some things, painting some things. But he came as a professional welder. And he lives in Canada, and through the week we didn't really know much about him. He was very quiet, but the last couple nights we were, my friend and I were prying into him at night and just trying to hear his story and learn more about him. And we found out that he, spent his whole life, the majority of his life, a part of biker gangs. And I didn't even know those were a thing at the time, and they're a real actual thing. And so his life was full to the brim for so many years with violence and drugs and illegal activity and sex and women and objectification and all this kind of stuff. And he was in sharing that part of his story, he was very humble. He didn't kind of like overshare or something like that, and he was just kind of like, this is part of my story. And when he was about 40 years old, he stumbled into a Pentecostal church service, out of nowhere, and he had this kind of supernatural encounter with Jesus, and to the best of what he knew of what it meant, he surrendered his life to Jesus. And for 6 years prior to meeting him, he sold everything that he had, and he was living in his welding shop in Canada, and he would weld until he had enough money to move to the developing world and weld playgrounds for kids at orphanages. And he would build these playgrounds and hang out, and he would always build a motorcycle when he was there too, to give kids rides on motorcycles while he was there. Live in his welding shop until he had money to go again. And he just went he went to Russia, to Africa. He spent some time with us in Ecuador. He said he spent some time in Colombia. He just kept doing this. He kept making money until he could go and just hang out with kids and love on them, love on kids that society had deemed in those parts of the world to be unlovable. And I just remember, I was pretty early in my journey, and I just remember sitting in front of this guy and just thinking, this is incredible. This guy is amazing. And I had never in the past been in proximity to someone with that level of commitment to the purposes of God in the world. And the week after, I came home, and I had 1 week where I was in my hometown before I went to start up a new semester in college. And that week when I was home, one of my longtime high school friends was home too, and we decided, hey, let's hang out one of these nights, and we decided to just make a pizza and watch a movie. And at that time, the Book of Eli had just come out. Does anybody remember this movie? So this is free advice. Anything Denzel does, you watch it. You go and you watch it. And so that's all I knew about the movie. I just knew Denzel Washington was in the movie. I didn't know anything else about the movie. And so we like got pizza. We were just hanging out and we watched this movie. Well, it turns out the Bible is in the movie. It's a centerpiece of the movie. And I won't tell you like the whole plot line, because if you haven't watched it, you should go and watch it. Like this afternoon, go and get Book of Eli and watch it. But at the end of the movie ends, and kind of what happens is just a piece of the movie is there's this treatment of the Bible as an acquisition of power, like a way to control people. Like the Bible is a way to control people, like a weapon. And at the end of the movie's over, and my friend and I just like start having this conversation. Now his name, I'll call him James, because I don't want to use his real name. But James grew up as a totally, like the most morally upright kid in town, and was at every church service. He was available to him, and was a part of every like Christian group you could be a part of in our town, and never did anything wrong, never stepped out of line, never got grounded, probably never got soap in his mouth, and never did anything wrong. And went to college, graduated, and at that point when I was with him, he kind of had marginal involvement with a local church, and was working full time and just spending, just getting more and more toys with his money. He wasn't giving his money anywhere. He wasn't involved in any kind of ministry or whatever, but he was like a very moral person. And we're sitting here talking about the Bible, and I'm kind of pushing him a little bit. I'm just trying to like push on some things, and in word, he would agree with everything that I believed and everything that Maurice would believe. But in praxis, in life, in activity, his life was totally different. And he felt like there's no problem here. There's no issue. And we went from a conversation about the Bible to a conversation about following Jesus, to kind of like challenging each other a little bit. And at the end of that conversation, I just remember him saying that he told me, sometimes I wish I would have had this like crazy rebellious phase of my life so that I could understand you. And so that I could understand other people that do this too. I don't understand the choices you make and how you've structured your life. I was and am still struck by this tension between Maurice and James. And you have people like that in your life too. You have those two kinds of lives around you too. Both profess Christ, both read the Bible, both have like pretty strong orthodox positions on theology, yet one seems to have a deeper commitment and capacity to love God and others than the other does. But why? That's the question. Why? What's the core difference between these two people? Why is that the case? Well, here Luke shares with us a tale of two contradictory lives. Meet Simon the Pharisee. Pharisees were interpreters, teachers, and enforcers of the law, the written and oral law. They were the carriers of what it meant to be a follower of God. And they were the teachers, the interpreters, and the enforcers of everything that meant. Part of that meant that he would have been set apart politically, socially, powerfully. Not just morally, not just spiritually, all of it wrapped up. So Simon would have been a highly esteemed man. He would have been biblically literate. He would have been biblically fluent. He would have seen the Old Testament as authoritative. That's a good thing, right? He would have at least cognitively believed that there was a missionary call on him and on his people to the Gentiles. That's right, isn't it? He would have believed in God's love for all people without denying individual responsibility. That would have been part of his cognitive. Actually, Jesus, if you looked at all the sects involved, like all of the different groups involved in that world at that time, he would have, there's a little bit of disagreement about this, but he would have probably mostly identified with the Pharisees, just in belief. He invites Jesus to dinner, and he immediately and consistently dishonors him. Water at a person who would actually wash the feet of the guest, to provide oil for dry facial skin, and even to anoint him with that oil, and to greet him with a kiss. These would have been the cultural standards for a guest that you're inviting in, whom you love and honor and appreciate and respect. And the one person in that room who was qualified, expected to know God, completely missed him. Completely missed him. Meet the sinful woman. The text isn't clear, but I think, and most commentators think, that there's a really good possibility that she was a prostitute, that she was sexually immoral. Partly because she's from the city, and that's a really prevalent issue in biblical cities. Also because her hair was exposed, which the text reveals, and for her hair to be exposed would have been extremely promiscuous and inappropriate. And also because, honestly, in that culture, in that time, and you see this throughout the New Testament, there weren't actually that many other ways to label a woman sinful because of the restrictions on what a woman actually had the right to do in that time. And depending on the size of that jar, that alabaster jar of perfume, it could have cost at least 300 days' wages, almost a full year of working wages to buy that jar of perfume. And this is the part where I think she must be in the sex industry in that time, and trying to survive, as a means of survival in that time. Because carpenters have tools, tax collectors have registrars, and prostitutes have perfume. It's not just some little thing that she has, some little gift that she has, something that she just bought that she has. It is a tool for her craft. Do you understand? It's not merely that she's coming with this thing that she just bought and she's just lavishing it on Jesus. She's taking a tool for her craft, a thing that she built so much for, a means of survival. And she's realizing in repentance, probably from a previous encounter with would have been facing toward the middle, eating, having a little bit of a robust theological dialogue about their ideas and about the ancient texts. And she runs into this house without an invitation, extremely inappropriate, and runs to where he is around the table. And that's why she gets to his feet, because his feet are on the outside, and just begins to lavish his feet with her tears and with this perfume. It is a message to say, I'm walking away from this. I'm giving up my vocation, even my means of survival, because it does not please or honor you, and you're delivering me from it. You're taking me out of it. It is a fullness of worship. It's a moment of weeping and honoring Jesus, all in a moment of repentance. The display is far beyond the cultural standards of hospitality. It is an act of extreme love, which also shames Simon, exposes Simon. And the one person in the room least qualified to know God, least trained to know God, least expected to know God, is the only one that sees him, is the only one that finds him. Both encounter Jesus. Both are in the proximity and presence of Jesus. Yet their responses to him are completely different. And I want to explore that difference between these two people. And Jesus offers us a framework of that exploration of the fundamental differences between them. And it's the only framework I'm going to use. He uses this story in verses 41 through 43 of two debtors who are indebted to the same creditor, who have received aid from the same person and owe it back. And I don't even care what the conversion rate is between like that ancient currency and ours today. It doesn't matter. What matters is the math. It's a tenfold debt. It doesn't matter how much. Just know it's a tenfold debt. $5, $50. $50, $500. It's a tenfold debt. So you could imagine, you come out of college and you've got $4,000 of student loans, and your friend came out of college and they have $40,000 in student loans, and if some legislation passes about loan forgiveness or something, who's going to get naked and dance in the streets? Your friend is going to do that. Your friend is going to do that. You're also free to do that, but probably your friend is going to involuntarily do that, right? So it ends with this line, and this is it. This is the line. This is what we take away. This is the framework of wrestling with this difference. She who is forgiven much loves much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. She who is forgiven much loves much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. And I think when you read that, I want to just wade around in that for a little bit, because I think when you first read that, it makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine if I had a debt and my friend had a debt and there was a tenfold difference and we both got forgiven, I can see that totally. This person's going to be like jovial, excited. They're going to go all crazy. That makes total sense. What's problematic is when you kind of like wade around in this theologically. It's extremely messy. It sounds pretty simple, makes sense, but it's very complicated. Let me just start digging around in that a little bit. Couldn't a morally upright person use this to justify their lack of love? Couldn't Simon, hearing Jesus say this, share the story and then end it with, he who is forgiven little loves little, he who is forgiven much loves much. Couldn't he look at Jesus and say, I agree, and I have not done nearly as much as she's done. I have been forgiven of less than she has. Therefore, it's okay for me to love less. Thank you. Amen. I don't have to love nearly as much as she does. I'm not held accountable to that. I don't have as much to make up for. I agree. Amen, Jesus. Let's do this some more. Preach. Is there a hierarchy to human sin? Are some people more sinful than others? That's the implication. That's what's hidden behind it. There are some people forgiven less, there's some people forgiven more, and that's why there's like this difference in how people love each other. Well, the implication then is there's a hierarchy of human sins. Some people sin more, some people sin less. Maybe it's qualitative, like some people just have more sins that they've done. Maybe it's quantitative, like maybe there are some sins that are heavier, they're like weighted a little differently, like I don't do that thing, but I do this other thing, but it's not nearly as bad, so I can love less. I'm free to love a little less. My wife and I we stumbled into this show called The Good Place. Has anybody seen this show? It's like brand new. It's had like half of one season. It's got Kristen Bell, and we actually didn't intend to watch it. We were watching a different show, and then Hulu flipped over and like started playing a different show because we didn't click anything. I think we were watching This Is Us, and when it got over, we were like rolling on the ground crying. And a new show just started without us being aware, and we were just weeping. Don't ever watch This Is Us; it'll hurt you. So The Good Place comes on, and we start watching it. And there's this in the pilot, in the first episode of The Good Place. Chris died, and she's in the afterlife. And the afterlife is called The Good Place. And there's a good place and a bad place. And she wakes up. First moment of the first episode, she wakes up in the good place. And in the first episode, they're kind of explaining how this works. I think it's an amazing premise for a show. It's very creative. And I just want to show you a little 2-minute clip from this, from the pilot of The Good Place. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your first day in the afterlife. You were all, simply put, good people. But how do we know that you were good? How are we sure? During your time on Earth, every one of your actions had a positive or a negative value, depending on how much good or bad that action put into the universe. Every sandwich you ate, every time you bought a magazine, every single thing you did had an effect that rippled out over time and ultimately created some amount of good or bad. You know how some people pull into the breakdown lane when there's traffic and they think to themselves, who cares? No one's watching. We were watching. Surprise! Anyway, when your time on Earth is ended, we calculate the total value of your life using our perfectly accurate measuring system. Only the people with the very highest scores, the true cream of the crop, get to come here, to the good place. What happens to everyone else, you ask? Don't worry about it. The point is, you are here because you lived one of the very best lives it could. And you won't be a true soulmate is here too. That's right, soulmates are real. One of the other people in your neighborhood is your actual soulmate, and you will spend eternity together. So welcome to eternal happiness. Welcome to the good place. Sponsored by otters holding hands while they sleep. You know the way you feel when you see a picture of two otters holding hands? That's how you're going to feel. Every day.
Brought to you by otters holding hands while they sleep. I saw some of you laughing because you were reading some of the positive and negative actions. If you could, I actually froze frame that and read all of them. I'm going to give you my top 5 really quick. My favorite ones. If you use the word bro code, it's a negative 8.2. So I'm sorry about that. If you pet a lamb, you get a plus 0.78. So those of you who are in the sheep industry, you got a good outlook. If you use Facebook as a verb, negative 5.5. I'm so sorry. If you blow your nose one nostril at a time, it's negative 1.4. For those of you who do that, you know who you are. For those of you who do that, figure it out. Get it together. If you fix a tricycle for a child who is indifferent about said tricycle, you get a plus 3.8. If you remain loyal to the Cleveland Browns, you get a plus 58.3. If you overstate your personal connection to a tragedy that has nothing to do with you, you get minus 40.5. You people. If you believe that some people are more sinful than others, that there's some kind of measurement game, then that means some people will be more loving than others, and that's okay. We can take this and we can say, that's fine. That's how God intended it. I've got less to make up for. I'm a better person. I think what Jesus is doing is he's actually being very subversive here. He's not doing the like, you whitewashed tombs, you brood of vipers. He's not like getting in their face. He's being very subversive with Simon. He's actually drawing Simon and all of us this morning into a deeper revelation, not just of the quantity of our sin, but the nature of sin itself. That sin is not an activity to be counted, but a whole state of being in corruption. That sin is a disease in the body, and the immoral activity you engage in is the external symptoms. That sin is an insurmountable debt, and trying to make penance for each individual wrong done is like paying interest and never touching the principal. Left to our own power, our own creativity, our own volition, to our own enterprise, it is an irreversible condition. And the reason this understanding of sin is so difficult to authentically carry, and some of us carry it in our minds, but it has not made it to your heart, and the reason why that's so difficult is because if you carry this understanding of sin, there is suddenly no difference between you and the people you despise. The way you maintain emotional and cognitive distance between you and people you think you are less than you is by keeping a record of wrongs. A record of quantity of wrongs or a record of quality or type of wrongs. A record that you come up with. A record that's subjective to you. Where you consign people to good place and bad place. You control the destiny. This is the classic condition of the Pharisees and the scribes, of whom Simon is only acting as an agent, a representative, a placeholder in this story. A placeholder for pride and self-righteousness and religiosity. And this is why God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Because the front door of the kingdom is a doorway draped in the humble confession of our own corruption, a confession which the proud cannot, will not make. It is the front door into the kingdom is through the window of humility. Through a confession that requires humility. In 1908, the Times newspaper, this classic publication, asked several authors to submit essays on the question, what is... And of those several authors, many of them responded with long, elaborate, complicated, persuasive essays on what is wrong with the world. But they accidentally sent this request to a scholar and Christian apologist, G.K. Chesterton. And Chesterton responded with a thorough essay, full of it, in response to this question. He says, "Dear sirs, regarding your question, what is wrong with the world? I am, yours truly, G.K. Chesterton." That is a theologically robust and true understanding of sin. The nature of sin, the condition, certainly G.K. Chesterton is one with a heart of a deep reservoir of love for God and for others. You see, self-righteousness does a blunt force trauma to our ability to love. Because your love flows from your encounter with the grace of God, which relies on your understanding of your sin. The smaller your sin is, the less you've done, the less that you've been a part of, the smaller God's grace is. It really didn't take that much. I was pretty close. I was really close. It did not take much for me. And when His grace is small, the meaning, the essence of what it is that He's accomplished for you, done for you, it is small. It is a small thing. And our cup of love is less full. And the scandal is that Simon loves little not because he has been forgiven little, but because he has not been forgiven at all. You cannot be forgiven a debt which is unknown to you, unrepented of, ununderstood. And Jesus is saying that our love relies on the realization of how much we have been forgiven, which hinges on the revelation of how deeply sinful we are. So what's the difference between the woman and Simon? It's that she knows the depth of her sin, met and outmatched by the grace of God. She has inherited a reconciliation with God that she has always longed for and been excluded from. A reconciliation which Simon believes he already has and is entitled to and has earned. What is the difference between Maurice and James? It's that Maurice knows the depths of his sin and the unearned grace of Jesus, while James simply has not understood the nature of his condition. And this is the humble faith which inherits the free gift of salvation which Jesus brings and offers. The humility to look at ourselves as we really are and to be caught up in the wind of God's grace. You do understand that this woman also could have opted for pride. It's not that the people who sin more often are like they're free from pride. They don't have that at all. They're just humility so much closer. No. She too could have opted for pride. She too could have said, "My sin is too great for God to handle." She too could have been self-obsessed and said, "My what I have done is too much for God to deal with." Or believe the lies about the world that she's excluded from the presence or the divine love of God. That she is, that He didn't. And she could buy that and not listen to Jesus. She too could have opted for pride. It is a type of pride which says, I'm too sinful, too distant, too broken for God. And that too is a forcing of God's story into the confines of your own instead of being caught up by Him. Last week on Saturday, I just took a moment and I read again the Furious Longing of God by Brennan Manning. This little short read by Brennan. It's like a devotional read. And the first page of that book, I love how he starts it. This is how he starts it, the first page. I'm Brennan. I'm an alcoholic. How I got there, why I left there, and why I went back is the story of life. I'm Brennan. I'm a Catholic. How I got there, why I left there, why I went back is also the story of my life. But it's not the whole story. I'm Brennan. I was a priest, but I am no longer a priest. I was a married man, but I'm no longer a married man. How I got to those places, why I left those places is the story of my life too. But it's not the whole story. I'm Brennan. I'm a sinner. That is the larger and more important story, and only God in His fury knows the whole of it. This is faith drenched in humility, to relinquish the power of defining who you are and to ignore who the world says you are and receive all of who God says you are. Pride will ignore something of what God says about you. You are a sinner in need of grace. You're fallen. You need my help. You need redemption. And pride might say, no, I'm actually not. And I already am saved a little bit. I've kind of figured this thing out. But pride will also say, I am broken. I am a sinner. I am messed up. But I'm not pursued by you. I'm not beautiful. I'm not made in your image. That's not true. But God to diminish or the other, to step away, only receive truth, but humility makes us receive all of what God has said about us, all of it. You don't get to decide who you are. He does. And humility receives. My freshman year was hard, so I took industrial design because it was like less math and less science, and I could still do product design, which is what I wanted to do. So I started with industrial design, but I didn't know that industrial design is technically an art major, so the first 2 years you're just taking like drawing and art history, and you're painting naked people and all this kind of stuff for 2 years before you do anything like industrial design-y. First year, I'm doing like chalk drawings and like, all these classes I just hated. And in my second semester, I took this drawing 2 class, and I just hated this stuff. And every single day, took roll call for class. He would ask you, here, can you say your name? And can you say on a scale of 1 to 10 how happy you are? And then can you express in your face that measurement? And I'll take a picture of your face. This is what he did every single class. We would get together, and you would have to say how happy you are on a scale of 1 to 10, and let him take a picture of your face expressing that. It was an drawing class, and I did well in my first like concrete art, and this was like abstract art, and I just really struggled with that. And my midterm project, you had 2 major projects. You had a midterm project and a final project. In my midterm project, I decided I took this huge piece of paper, and basically everybody was given this same size piece of paper, and you had to put art on that same medium. But it was like totally creative what you wanted to do. So I decided I'm just going to use the same size circle, like a tiny circle. And that's all I'm going to use, and I'm going to fill this thing with like an elegant design, but only using that circle. So you just put like 1,000 of them next to each other, and it creates something. And then you draw more, and this is 3 hours of my life. And for me, to this day, I think that thing was the best artistic piece I ever did in my life. I was like so outrageously proud of it. And we bring it in for midterms. You got to post everything up on the wall, and you kind of critique each other's work. And he gives you a grade vocally in front of everyone, so everybody knows everybody's grades. He literally just tells you, "Here's your grade." To my piece of art, and I'm just like, and so I'm kind of explaining it, and everybody's kind of like, some people are kind of impressed, and some people are kind of like, well, could you do this a little bit differently? Kind of this critiquing process, and I thought, like, I did really well. I really crushed this. And he looks at me, and he says, "Lucas, you did great work. I really appreciate this. C-." And I was like, and I had never, listen, I was like really committed to I'd never had a C in my life, ever. And he's like, C-. And I was just furious, crushed, emotion. I just held it in. I was like, okay, C-. I'm really excited. Next art piece. Let's go to the next art piece. And the guy after me was a friend of mine. He lived in the same building as me, and he worked in the dining hall. And 2 days before, I asked him, "Dude, I'm so close to my thing being done. What are you working on? How close are you to being done?" And he totally forgot about this project. 100% forgot about this project. He was like, "That's due Friday? What?" And I said, "Yeah, dude, you got to bring it in Friday." And he's like, "I have not even thought about what I'm going to do." Like, he just totally blanked. So what he did, I know what he did. He lived in my building. What he did, while he was working in the dining hall, on Friday, 2 hours before the class, he took ranch dressing, barbecue sauce, like all these sauces, and he took the ladles, and he just did this like craziness on it. And it was and then he like put it outside in the hot sun to like dry it a little bit. And he brought that thing in and put it up, and everybody's treating it all serious, like, "Ooh, I think you could have done this. I think maybe this should have been a thing," or whatever. And the teacher was like, "This was cutting edge, A+." I was like losing my mind. I lost my mind. So final project is coming up at the end of that semester, and I'm like, I had already changed my major by the end of the semester. So I'd already changed my major by the time the final project came around, but I still wanted to try to get a good grade. But I was so done with this art stuff, and I was like, but I decided I didn't like this guy, And we kind of got in a couple like verbal altercations and stuff after class. He didn't like me, I didn't like him, whatever. So I decided to spite him. What I was going to do with my final project, I was going to make fun of him a little bit. I was going to try to spite. So 2 days before the final project is due, 3 days. It was 3 days. I put my piece of paper next to the sink in my dorm room on the ground. And every single time for 3 days that I brushed my teeth, I spit my toothpaste on the paper. Like, not in any kind of intentional design or anything like that. I would literally just brush my teeth and then just spit on the paper and then just continue brushing, whatever, and just move on. So by the third day, this thing's just like, it's just disgusting. It's nasty. And I had to bring it in, I had to wrap it in saran wrap. So I like wrapped it up or whatever, brought it in, put it up. I put it up wrapped in saran wrap on the and there's like, sometimes you don't get all the toothpaste good, so there's like globs, because you didn't get it going or whatever. Yeah, so this is gross. I'll hurry up. So we put it up, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is interesting. Like, this is to tell us more about this." And I'm like I'm just being so sarcastic. Like, I was trying to capture or whatever, and I was trying to build meaning into it. And the guy looked, dude, I was like trying to. He like turned the tables on me. I was like trying to like get him riled up. And he's like, "I love this. This is the best thing you've done." He literally looked at me and he said, "The finest work you've done this semester. The finest work you've done." I'm like angry just remembering this. I'm not kidding you. Ever since I've been like reading and studying, I know if I have a more powerful image of that memory. Those who have labored to perfect themselves, who have spent 43 hours eraser marks and finds the most broken, nasty, meaningless artwork, and he says, "That one's beautiful. I'll take it. Name your price. I will take it. I want it. I'll give you $1 million. That's the one I want right there. If it's going to cost me my life, I'll take it. I will allow the breaking of my own self to secure that beautiful art piece for myself." Brendan Manning in that same book says this: "The men and women who are fully light are those who have gazed deeply into the darkness of their own imperfect existence, who have gazed deeply into their own mess, their own insecurities, their own past, their own imperfections, their own brokenness, and in that place have heard the voice of the Lord say, 'You are beautiful. I want it. I want it all. I want everything. I want you. I want you. And I'll purchase you.'" And when we forget how sinful we are, we forget how good and how big and robust the gospel is, and we no longer have anything to offer our neighbors, our community, our friends, anything. The resources and capacity to love God and your neighbor sustainably, with longevity, with robust sacrificial acts of love, lies in the long haul and the realization of the depth of our sin and how undeserving we are of His love, of this gift that He's given us. Finish with this last thought, this last little difference between these two contradictory lives. The last difference I want to examine is how each of them come into the presence and proximity of Jesus, into His space, wanting something different from Him, wanting something very different. Simon wants what he can get from being in proximity with Jesus, what he can get, what he can take. That's exposed by him inviting Jesus over to dinner and then actually displaying none of the cultural practices of hospitality. You would do that. You would do those cultural practices of hospitality if you actually loved, honored, wanted to be in the presence of, wanted to honor, show dignity of the person you've invited. If you don't do any of those things, it exposes that you weren't inviting them for them. You weren't inviting them to be with them, to love them, to honor them, to just spend time with them. And it exposes that what he was doing was actually a pull at power, social power, political power, to find someone who is an influencer of a pocket of people and to want influence over those people and therefore to invite him just to be, it's a PR move. We understand this. I mean, if I were to, what's somebody famous in Tampa, like Derek Jeter or something like that? Is Derek Jeter here? If I invited Derek Jeter over to my house, I don't care anything about Derek Jeter. I'm a Cubs fan, but I'm not a baseball fan, so I don't care anything about baseball. It's a paradox, I understand. But I would, if the thing that would happen, If I invited Derek Jeter over to spend dinner at my house, the one thing I would be looking forward to do with him is to take a selfie and put it up online. Because I want everybody to see that I had Derek Jeter over to dinner. I'm not going to be asking him about like his stats or his stuff, or like I'm not going to be enjoying him, anything like that. I invited him over because I want people to see that I had Derek Jeter over to my house. And the people who I invite over to my house for that dinner are going to be the people that I really want to respect me. I really want to impress them. So I'm going to invite all. So even the people who are in that room were probably selected for personal reasons, personal gain reasons. And by the way, realize that Jesus is not just confronting Simon in this moment. He is making a mockery of this event. A mockery of religious intellectuals gathering in a space and just talking about, just tossing around their ideas in a way that continues to exclude marginalized people. And to just any indication of wanting to be faithful to any of it. And let's bring more people in, more intellectuals, to just talk about our ideas or whatever, and have a little fest. Once somebody walks in the room who is actually in need of the love of God, it's like, whoa, no, this is not what this is about. He is making a mockery of that event. And I want you to take very seriously the evaluation of whether or not the thing that you do is like that. If somebody came in the room who's broken and messed up and socially awkward, would they find love and space and inclusion and engagement? Or would it be kind of like, this isn't right? Like you're kind of throwing off you're throwing off our inductive Bible study. That's application. You went too fast. You went too fast. Application. This isn't the right place for you. We'll do this somewhere else. Like your spaces that only involve the intellectual pursuit, with nothing to do with faithfulness and the love of God for people, is a mockery to the gospel. And this woman comes into the proximity of Jesus not wanting what he offers her, but wanting him. That's it. That's all. She could care less who is watching. She could care less the social expectations or how things are supposed to be or how she's fitting in, or if it's entertaining, or if the lighting is appropriate, or if the ideas being discussed are super new and cutting edge and how it's decorated, or if it's her scene. Where is Jesus? All I want. And to worship him is all I want. To be at his feet, to give him everything that I have, to spend my life on him in some meaningful way. That's all I want. Knowing that Jesus is the only thing in this life that we need, that he is sufficient for all joy, and the only worthy recipient of the breaking of our alabaster jars, the breaking of our whole selves for him. Your life is like a little alabaster jar full of precious perfume, a great treasure, and you're going to spend it somewhere. I'm just going to tell you, your career is not worth the alabaster jar. Your comfort is not worth the alabaster jar. A sense of self-importance is not worth the alabaster jar. A great marriage is not worth the alabaster jar. Your privacy is not worth the alabaster jar. Jesus alone is worthy of the shattering of your life. The spending of everything you are. And we pour our perfume on him only as a worshipful return to the one who first shattered his life for us, who first poured out his life, his alabaster jar, his treasure on us, on the one who was more precious, more worthy, and broke that jar of his life in pursuit of our redemption out of senseless, furious love. And on that night that he was betrayed, he took the bread and he gave thanks, saying, "This is my body, broken for you. When you eat it in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took the cup and poured it out, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for the forgiveness of sins. And when you drink it in remembrance of me." To these mental memory of King Jesus breaking his life for you, you come and you receive the wholeness of what he has said about you. In humility, you reject what you believe about yourself and what the world believes about you, and you receive the fullness of what he has declared about you. That you were once a broken one, a fallen one, in need of salvation, which you cannot bring, and you must cling to this free gift that he has given you. And at the same time, you are a beautiful one, created in his image, which he longs for, which he came for, and you receive both. And as you remember the breaking of his body for you, you walk away from the table willing to hear from him about how to break your life for him. In worship, in return to him. Love, because at his feet is the only place that's worth being. And you understand our commitment to mission in this community, our commitment to mission is a commitment to the feet of Jesus, to being with Jesus, because that's where he is. So when you come, you receive the fullness of what he has said about you, and you come away longing to break your jar for him. When you're ready, the element's given for you.